wake up every morning and tell myself, good morning, gorgeous. Sometimes you gotta look in the mirror and say, good morning, gorgeous. No one else can make me feel this way. Good morning, gorgeous. Oh, it's the simplest thing I can say. Good morning, gorgeous. Gorgeous. I ain't talking about getting no Karen Bacon. I'm talking about as soon as I wake up, I say good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning.
WRSV, Elm City.
Turn up.
Choice FM. Show on Choice FM.
Well, happy Monday, June 10th to everyone that is listening and or watching. I'm James Gailliard, and this is the James Gailliard Show live on 92.1 FM on your dial. I love choicefm.com, and of course, we're hanging out on YouTube and on Facebook, and we're going to do our best to grab a hold of all of your comments. Listen, I want you to invite every black person and every white person you know to tune into today's show. The whole show I'm dedicating to what I'm calling, and I'm tagging this from Carter G. Woodson, the African-American historian and educator. I'm tagging it from him, so it's not original or unique to James Gailliard. Today's show, I want to tag the miseducation of the Negro. I know. I want to tag it the miseducation of the Negro because as much as I want to get to other stuff, it appears to me that the Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina, Mark Robinson, and the U.S. Senator from South Carolina, Tim Scott, it seems as if they've been giving out Kool-Aid that all of a sudden Representative Byron Donalds, who is the Republican congressman from Florida, started drinking. And he started passing out this So there's some Kool-Aid going out in the community. And they want you to drink it. And they want to convince you that we live in a that means after, a post-racist America. And this is why I'm saying invite every black and white person you know. Because this is what we're going to do today. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to lay out what Representative Byron Donaldson said. Then I'm going to give you education about Jim Crow because he made a specific comment not 10 years ago, not 100 years ago, this week, okay? In the past week, he made a specific comment about Jim Crow as it relates to the black family. And so I want to walk you through that. I want to walk you through the history. And then what I want to do is I want to give you the data. And this is why I'm saying invite everybody, black and white. Because this is what it's going to take to make our country better. This is what it's going to take to make Raleigh, Durham, Rocky Mount, Wilson, Roanoke Rapids. This is what it's going to take to make Tarboro, Scotland Neck, Leggett, Enfield, Whitakers, Knightdale, Zebulon. What it's going to take to make us better is we're going to have a willingness to process our biases. We're going to have a willingness to process our blind spots. And we're going to have to weigh it. Now, watch this. We're going to have to weigh it against the data. And if the data leads me to a place where I have to own the fact that my biases or my blind spots misled me, then I need to be honest enough, truthful enough, forthright enough I need to operate with enough character and enough integrity to be able to own the fact that, you know what, I was wrong. So we have people like Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, who will make statements, as he has continually, that because Barack Obama was president in 2008 and again in 2012, he said, because I can be lieutenant governor, that means we live in a system of government in this nation that is not systemically racist. That is what Mark Robinson says. It is not. Here's the question now. Does the data prove that? Not your emotion, not your bias, not your blind spot. Does the data prove it? And here it is. If the data proves opposite, I'm willing to hold up my hand and say, wow, he saw it different than I did. I guess I was wrong. And then you have somebody like a U.S. Senator from South Carolina, Tim Scott, who makes comments. America's no longer racist. And so, sip, sip, sip. Where's the Kool-Aid? Sip, sip, sip. Representative Byron Donaldson. First of all, before I even get into his ridiculousness about Jim Crow, and I'm going to educate you on Jim Crow today, because we need to recognize what is happening here, right? There is a movement to spill propaganda, misinformation, and to use the tone of today's show, the miseducation of the Negro, as a means and tool of political, social, spiritual manipulation and ultimately oppression. Did you hear what I said? Manipulation as a tool, this tool of manipulation, so that ultimately people of color can be oppressed. And the reason I want white people listening today, I want you listening every day, is because most of us sit in our silos. All we do is hang out with people who think just like we think. And because they think just like we think, all they do is affirm what we think. Because we are so tentative about how we feel. We know it's based on emotion, not on fact, not on data, that we're afraid to be able to speak to someone who may think differently because they actually might have data and information. It's why the average Christian, and I'm sure it's like this in other faith groups too, but I'm not in other faith groups. It's why us Christians have a hard time opening the door when Jehovah's Witness knocks, because we don't know how to raise up an apologetic. An apologetic doesn't mean apology. That's terminology for us. It means defense. We don't know how to raise up an apologetic, a defense about what we believe. And so here on the James Gailliard Show, I want to raise up people that want to be critical thinkers, people that are willing to process the information and the data. And so Representative Byron Donalds, he suggests, listen to this, that black families were better off during the Jim Crow era. We were better off during the Jim Crow era. Now, you got to understand, Byron Donalds, Republican from Florida, he may or may not be on the short list, don't really know, as a potential vice presidential pick for Donald Trump. But he's campaigning for Trump. So he's campaigning for Trump, and this hits close to me because he's campaigning for him in Philadelphia. And when we get to the break time, I'm going to take a look at all your comments and everything, so y'all can put them in. I'll catch up with them all. But I want to set this thing up. And so he's campaigning in Philadelphia. He's at a Philadelphia campaign event. Listen to this is the campaign event. Congress, cognac, and cigars. Now, did you catch that? Congress, cognac, and cigars. Now, I've been in the General Assembly, and I can tell you stuff like beers and bourbon, stuff like bow ties and bourbon. Those events are designed to attract the African-American community. You don't hear as much about that stuff in the white community. So he's at a Philadelphia event. The event is called Congress, Cognac, and Cigars. It's named at, get this, garnering black male voters. So he makes the statement at the event that black folk families were better off in the Jim Crow era. So here's the question of today's show. Remember, the theme is miseducation of the Negro. I'm going to walk you through what happened during Jim Crow. And then I'm going to share with you data as of today. And then you tell me, I want you to let me know, is Byron Donaldson correct or is he wrong? Black people and white people, does your data, as much as we have, and y'all don't dare try to call me racist or whatever. My mama was white, okay? So she taught me to be a truth teller. And sometimes black folk not gonna like it, sometimes white folk not gonna like it, but we'll never move the needle if all we do is keep drinking the Kool-Aid that's going to reinforce the propaganda and the misinformation that is holding groups of people hostage and in oppression. So some of you don't even know what Jim Crow was. Jim Crow was the name of a caste system. It was a racial caste system. It was a racial caste system which primarily operated in your border states and in your southern states, somewhere between like 1877 and the mid 60s. Did you hear what you're not even hearing me today. The mid 60s. Guess what happened in the mid 60s? I was born. Jim Crow was operating while I was born. So I was born into a Jim Crow era. So when people are like, well, that wasn't in your lifetime. Sir, it was in my lifetime, actually. My mother and father could not legally be married in this country until 2 years after I was born. So for everybody who acts like this stuff is so far removed, it's not. And so Jim Crow raised up a series of rigid anti-black laws. Stop right there. The potential running mate for Donald Trump says that an era of time where there was a series of rigid anti-black laws was a better time for the black family than right now. So during Jim Crow, and the reason tell you why this matters in North Carolina, y'all, listen to me. Because Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson thinks the exact same thing. So if you think this is so far removed, well, I'm not in Florida, he's not my congressman. Well, you got a brother who's running for governor who thinks this stuff is true and is damaging not only to black people, but to white people. So under Jim Crow, African Americans were relegated to the status of second-class citizen. Okay, so at a time where you're second-class citizen, that was a better time for the black family. Jim Crow legitimized anti-black racism. The white church, many of the Christian ministers and theologians, that's why you had, the Southern Baptist Convention grounded itself during this time, drilling down deep. They still are about to split over the fact whether or not women should be able to be pastors. They're talking about dismantling, removing entire churches. For those of you who are landing, you're in these Assemblies of God churches and you're in these Southern Baptist Convention churches, and if you have them to think, they're gonna vote in a way that's gonna be most equitable for everybody. Listen, sis, bruh, they're voting in a way to remove churches that have a female with pastor attached to their name. I'm not even talking about senior pastor. I'm talking about pastor for discipleship. You got a pastor for discipleship in the Southern Baptist Church. We can't include you anymore because you're elevating women equal to men. That's exactly how Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson thinks. Let me quote him. It's no longer your body. Hey, men have control of their body. Women don't have control there, so I guess they're second-class citizens. And don't, I'm not even getting into the whole abortion conversation because y'all know as a pastor, every opportunity I get to defend life and to help parents and potential parents to make the choice of having children, I do that. We're talking about a whole different situation. So we had whole theologies that were built up and preached to prove or to try to show black people as servants, to support racial segregation. You had eugenicide. You had social Darwins. You had people at every educational level who were taught to believe, taught to embody research that black people were innately, intellectually, and culturally inferior to white people. Now, I'm going back to late 1800s to mid 1960s. Black people being innately intellectual, intellectually, culturally inferior to white people. And now we have a sitting congressman who says while that was happening, it was better off for black people than it is right now. Agree or disagree, y'all? Where are y'all at on this? Ask your white friends. Ask your white friends, do you believe black people are educational, intellectually, and culturally inferior to white people? Ask that one question. Do you believe that black people are intellectually and culturally inferior to white people? It's a yes or no answer. If they say no, I don't believe that, then what they're saying is we don't believe the propaganda of the Republican Party. So then the next question is, then how are you going to vote? And so during this Jim Crow time, you had pro-segregation politics. So you had people giving these eloquent speeches about the danger of integration, that if there was interracial marriage, that there would be a mongrelization of the white race, and that there was a danger. Y'all, I can't make this stuff up. If y'all just tuning in, I'm James Gailliard. This is the James Gailliard Show, and I'm all in on the miseducation of the Negro today. And I want you to I'm inviting every black and white person you know to listen to today's show, and I challenge you to prove me where I'm wrong. Byron Donaldson, that's who I'm talking about. And why am I talking about the Republican congressman from Florida? Because he has drunk the same Kool-Aid that Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson is giving, that Tim Scott is giving. And so it affects us in North Carolina. We have to understand what is the propaganda that is seeking to divide all of us, black, white, rich, poor, urban, rural. Right? What is at stake is an opportunity for all of us to live a better life. And so here's the stuff you can't make up, y'all. Byron Donaldson is married to a white woman. Now, y'all know, I don't care nothing about that. Right? My mama, the most amazing human being as far as I'm concerned to have ever walked planet Earth. Ruth Mae Gailliard, listen, was an angel amongst men. My white, red-haired, blue-eyed Irish mama, married to my dark-skinned, thick-lipped, from Utahville, South Carolina daddy. So I don't care nothing about the fact that Byron Donaldson's wife is white. What I care about is the fact that if what he states is true, he is a contradiction of his own statement. Because he says the black family was better off during the Jim Crow era. Well, during the Jim Crow era, he would have not been capable of marrying a white woman. So how is it that the black community is better off at a time where you yourself would not have even received the same benefit then as you do now? The answer is because you have a group of politicians that are raised up, and they are all over the place. You see them, Democrats, Republicans, white, black. But right now, I'm talking about three specific black male Republican ones. Tim Scott, and you know, on this show, I'm not afraid to call it out. Tim Scott, Mark Robinson, Byron Donaldson. The reason they embrace this kind of rhetoric is because they have this unique platform right now. And what they care most about is protecting their platform, protecting their little job, protecting their little environments. It is not for the benefit of the masses, and that's what politics should be about. How do we move about public policy in such a way that moves everybody forward? And so here's a person now who, out of their own admission, out of their own statement, you had newspaper and magazine writers who routinely referred to black people as niggers, as coons, as darkies. They were constantly reinforcing black stereotypes. They had children's games that portrayed black people as inferior beings. Every major social institution, I'm talking about Jim Crow. If you're just joining, I'm James Gailliard. This is the James Gailliard Show. I'm on my high horse today. I'm all out today about the miseducation of the Negro. And I'm inviting everybody you know and I know to listen, chime in, comment. I'll respond to your comments, I promise you, once I take my first break. Every major societal institution reflected and supported the oppression of black people during Jim Crow. Listen to me again. Every major societal institution. So we have Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, U.S. Senator Tim Scott, Congressman Byron Donaldson, believing that every major societal institution should reflect and support the oppression of black people. Did you hear me? So during Jim Crow, undergirded the system with all these rationalizations. And here were the rationalizations. The rationalizations were white people are superior to black people. The rationalization was that they were intelligent, more moral. I'm going to talk about that in the data. Everybody type in data. Put my preacher hat on. It was proven in civilized behavior. That's why sexual relations between black people and white people would produce a mongrel race which would destroy America. Look at me. Do I look like a mongrel race to anybody? But Jim Crow said when black people and white people intermarried, it would produce a mongrel race, and the mongrel race would destroy America. I've dedicated my entire life to helping save America, to try to make our communities better and different. As a matter of fact, I jokingly refer to interracial people as the chosen people. We have this weird kind of spot that we have to live in. And here we have Byron Donaldson saying that the black community was better off during Jim Crow. And so, but he himself is married to a white woman. I mean, it's kind of like our U.S. Supreme Court justice. They benefit from affirmative action, but then they want to dismantle it after they have been the one benefiting from it. And so they treated black people they would not treat black people as equals. They did not encourage interracial sexual unions. Any activity which suggested social equality encouraged interracial sexual relations. If necessary, violence would be used to keep black people at the bottom of the racial hierarchy. That's why you had lynchings and killings. And so you had this norm of Jim Crow etiquette. Let me tell you about what some of the norms were. I'm talking about what Jim Crow looked like. Why are you talking about Jim Crow from the late 1800s to the mid-1900s? I'm talking about it because it's at the center of politics in America this week. When Byron Donaldson, a congressman from Florida, makes a statement in Philadelphia during a political event that targeted African-American males. So I'm an African-American male and I'm from Philadelphia. So, bruh, yeah, you all up in my business. And you make a statement that the black family was better off during Jim Crow than it is now? Okay. So let's talk about then the norm. You tell me if you believe him. And then after I get done the emotional side of my argument, I'm going to give you the data. A black man could not offer his hand to shake hands with a white man during Jim Crow. When's the last time you shook hands with a white man? If you're black. Or if you're white, you shook hands with a black man. Well, during Jim Crow, you couldn't do that. Republican Party says we were better off when we could not shake hands with a white person. Well, let's give another cultural norm during that time. Black and white people were not supposed to eat together. So I guess we want to go back to segregated lunch counters. We want to go back to segregated water fountains, segregated bathrooms. How would you feel if you showed up at the airport this week and there was a black restroom and a white restroom? I'm not talking about black people right now. My good white friend, how would you feel? Would it bother you at all that your black friends were treated differently? That your colleagues who were pastors were treated differently? Would it bother you at all that the people that your children ran track with or cheered with were treated differently? Would it bother you at all? This is the propaganda that is dividing our country. And what is the problem is, those of us who know different, we are so rather be accepted by the handful of people that we can be accepted that we will not push back against the propaganda and the miseducation. So maybe today's show is not just the miseducation of the Negro. Maybe it's the miseducation of the white person too. So we couldn't eat together. If they did eat together, white people had to always be served first. Okay, here's a quick poll question. When's the last time, this is a poll question for black people. Have you ever been to a restaurant where you got to a restaurant after a white family or after a white person, but yet they got waited on first? That's happened to me. That's Jim Crow era stuff. Under no circumstances was a black male to offer to light the cigarette of a white female, because lighting her cigarette was a gesture of intimacy, and intimacy was not accepted during Jim Crow amongst interracial people. Black people were not allowed to show public affection toward one another in public. So even amongst a black couple that were married, they couldn't grab each other's hand. Why? Because if they grabbed each other's hand or if a husband kissed his wife on the cheek, it offended white people. So they couldn't do it during Jim Crow. But Byron Donaldson says you're better off. You were better off, he says, not being able to hold your wife's hand now. You were better off when you couldn't hold your wife's hand than you are now. And if you think for a moment, if people are going to show you who they are, we've got to believe them, y'all. Jim Crow etiquette prescribed that black people were introduced to white people, never white people to black people. Let me again. Black people were introduced to white people, but never white people to black people. So, James, this is thus and such, but never thus and such, this is James. I remember one time I was at Bienvenue Country Club here in Rocky Mount. We have a handful of black members. There's still not a lot of us. And I remember a white gentleman in the club walking up to me, an older white gentleman. We having a conversation at that, there in some previous times. And then him telling me that I was the most intelligent black person he had ever met. That didn't happen 50 years ago, 100 years ago. That happened like 5 years ago. Well, maybe it was probably 10 years ago now. Why couldn't I just be one of the most intelligent men he'd ever met? But this 75-year-old white man said to me that my intellect was only as good as my race. I was one of the most intelligent black men. And Byron Donaldson is saying, hey, we are better off today. We were better off under Jim Crow, rather, than we are today. Look, I got to take my first break. This is James Gailliard. This is the James Gailliard Show. I'm going to pay attention to all that y'all been chiming in on. When I come back, I'm going to give you the rest of the Jim Crow era history lesson, and then I'm going to give you the data, and then all of you get to vote, and you get to vote to determine, are we or are we not better off since Jim Crow? We'll be right back.
The James Gailliard Show on Choice FM. North Carolina requires ID to vote in 2024. Polls accept your North Carolina driver's license, U.S. passport, and NC voter ID, photo ID from your county's Board of Elections, a college or university ID, or a state, local government, or charter school employee ID. Be ready for election season. For more information, go to safevoternc.org or ncblackalliance.com.
Diner, 132 South Church Street, Rocky Mount. Juicy burger, hot, delicious wing, yummy spaghetti, and the first pizza to ever be served downtown Rocky Mount. Hot, delicious pizza and more at Pop's Diner. Pop's Diner for hot dogs. Pop's Diner for lunch. Open daily from 11 till 7 p.m. City workers get the Pop's hookup. Pop's Diner open from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Wings, pizza, burgers, spaghetti, salads, and more. Hot, fresh, and fast at Pop's downtown Rocky Mount. Open 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday.
Mortgage Myth. You need at least a 20% down payment when buying a home. Boss. At North State Bank, our lenders will work with you to find home financing that fits your budget and a down payment. Our lenders can also help you explore down payment assistance programs that may help you access the funds you need to hear those three beautiful words, clear to close. Learn more at northstatebank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Medoc Metals, 280 October Lane in Enfield. We buy scrap and pay you cash on the spot. Call 252-883-1598.
Or y'all could go by the scrap yard too. And they're right there.
That's right. You can give them the address?
Drive on that street 48, pass by that dollar store and keep going.
Get the physical address, Craig.
It's in Medoc, close to that store in the corner.
Get out of the way.
It ain't close by there.
Medoc Metals, 280 October Lane in Enfield.
Oh, yeah.
Call us at 252-883-1598. So can you give them the address now?
280 October Lane in Enfield.
Say it all together, Craig.
280 October Lane, Dad. They know.
They don't know. That's why I'm telling you to say it. Boy.
280 October Lane.
Medoc Metals, 280 October Lane in Enfield. Bring us all your scrap and we'll pay you cash same day. Got a vehicle? Bring it to us. We'll pay you cash same day. You got a vehicle but just can't get it to us. We'll come get it. Call 252-883-1598.
The James Gailliard Show on Choice FM.
Well, we're back. I'm out the gate, y'all, so we might as well just ride this horse right on to the end of the show. Byron Donaldson, congressman from Florida, has been drinking the same propaganda Kool-Aid as Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson here in North Carolina, U.S. Senator Tim Scott in South Carolina, And I'm trying to make sure nobody in our state drinks any more of it, because it's designed to divide, it's designed to oppress, it is designed to manipulate, and I'm trying to educate us on the challenges and the dangers of it. So Byron Donaldson, while in Philadelphia at an event on Congress, cognac, and cigars to attract African-American male voters to the Republican Party, makes the statement that black American families were better off in the Jim Crow era than they are today. And I'm simply on today's show trying to prove if he's right or wrong, to ask y'all to be able to vote when we decide at the end. And so let's talk more about Jim Crow, and then I'm going to give you the data, okay? I'm giving you kind of the philosophy and the spirit. That's it. I'm giving you the philosophy and the spirit of Jim Crow. And then in a moment, I'm going to give you the law, the spirit and the law. So spirit now, then I'm going to give you the law behind Jim Crow, okay? Or the data, rather. Let me give you the data. During Jim Crow, white people did not use courtesy titles of respect when referring to black people. So they would not call you Mr. or Mrs. They would not if you were a doctor, they wouldn't identify you as such. But black people were called by their first names. So you could have a 10-year-old white boy referring to a 45-year-old doctor, and if his first name was James, he would look at you and just call you James. Meanwhile, black people had to use courtesy titles when referring to white people. We could not call them by their first names. According to Byron Donaldson, according to, I'm not going to leave Tim Scott out of this because we're not in South Carolina and the show doesn't go that far, but I'm just going to stay here in North Carolina. So I'm going to say, according to Byron Donaldson and according to Mark, our Lieutenant Governor, Mark Robinson, these are the things they espouse. And I'm not afraid to call out their name. Share the information. They want to talk all big and bad as if nobody has the ability to critically think through, their semantics. Motorists had the right. White motorists always had the right of way at every intersection. So let's look at when, according to Stetson Kennedy, who's the author of the Jim Crow Guide, he wrote that in 1990. He offered these simple rules that black people were supposed to observe in conversing with white people. This is the last thing I'm going to say, then I'm going to give you the research. Never assert or even intimate that a white person is lying. Interesting. You can't lie. If you're white, you can't lie, according to Jim Crow. Number 2, never impute dishonorable intentions to them. Number 3, never suggest that a white person is from an inferior class. So you have to always be superior. And the reason I'm saying, hey, jump on to share this with your black friends and your white friends is because I think all of us, and this is one of the things that's going to hurt all of us, if our white friends who don't believe this stay silent because it benefits their social status, then ultimately your silence is going to be considered agreement. And we're going to need what we had in the civil rights movement. All groups of people, black and white, all different faiths and denominations, working together to advance the common good. And that really is what should be our effort, our goal, is the common good. Never comment upon the appearance of a white female, because again, they did not want to have interracial marriages. So let's talk about the way we are today, that as it relates to, so people, this is where people are going to say, well, Pastor, that was the late 1800s to the mid-1960s. We don't live in that kind of racist America anymore. And so even though Byron Donaldson said that the black family was better off during Jim Crow era than they are now, we don't live in that racist America. That's what so many of my white friends try to tell me. So let's see what the data says. I'm going to go through a few data points, and then let's talk about them, okay? So there has been extensive academic research and extensive data collected by the federal government and by researchers, by think tanks that have documented, and I'm not talking about this is 30 years old, I'm talking about this documentation is under 5 years old. about what does the American experience look like for Black Americans in the United States, and how is it different than their white counterparts? So let's talk about it, and let me talk. We're talking about systemic racism. Remember, one of the reasons the position of lieutenant governor is so important is because they did the State Board of Education. When Mark Robinson, I want to say it was 2021, I think, when they started looking at changes to the North Carolina curriculum, Mark Robinson made very, very clear statements that systemic racism no longer existed in North Carolina. Which goes back to Carter G. Woodson's book, The Miseducation of the Negro, because he asserted then, as it is the case now as far as I'm concerned, that there was a Europeanized curriculum embedded in our public schools that really caused there to be an inferior education being given to children of color, which is why DEI is now being stripped. Because during affirmative action and various opportunities and bills and general statutes to create equity in the land, the moment equity started coming about, now there's this movement of reversal of that to go back to what Carter G. Woodson was referring to when he talked about the miseducation of the Negro. So let's talk about some of this. So when we talk about systemic racism, we're talking about that which is embedded throughout the entire society. It's embedded in our politics. It's embedded in our policies. It's embedded, excuse me, it's embedded in our various institutions like our banks, our schools, our companies, our for-profits, our not-for-profits, our government agencies, and our law enforcement. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the employment to population ratio. In other words, the percentage of people that have a job compared to the percentage they are as the overall population. The employment population ratio measures the share of a demographic group that has a job. Listen to this. That employment to population ratio remains lower for Black people. In other words, the unemployment rate has spiked for all racial groups during the COVID pandemic. It recovered, but it did not recover as well for Black people. Now, I want you to look at me. I want you to look at some of the people that are on my show right now. People like LaShawn Jenkins, people like Sharonda Bullock, people like John Hayes, people like Joyce Gailliard, people like Tammy Robertson, people like Christopher McCoy, people that are like Sheila Dancy, people like Cindy Dunn, people like David Richardson, people like Natasha. Are you telling me that what you know about those people, they don't want to work? So what's interesting to me is that we hear the data that proves systemic racism, but we want to chalk it up to saying that Black people don't want to work. I'm using the employment statistic right now. But the reality of it is the Black people you do know do want to work. So it doesn't matter. Like, your lived experience doesn't match intuitively what you're saying, because emotionally you want to believe that Black people are inferior. And that's why I'm offering the data to show you Black people are not inferior. There's just a systemic system against us. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, these are government agencies, by the way, shows that the lowest percentage of people working in management, professional, and related occupations, African Americans. That number is like 43% of all employed white people are in a higher paying major occupational category, almost half. You compare that to a third for Blacks, a third. Now, can we connect the dots? Are y'all ready? Are y'all ready? Are you ready to connect the dots? Here's where you connect the dots. Connect those dots because under Jim Crow, remember we talked about Jim Crow at the beginning of the show. Under Jim Crow, there were racist hiring practices. Those racist hiring practices kept Black people out of business for decades. So literally, Jim Crow would have kept my father out of management. That would have impacted the income of our home. That would have impacted where I went to college, or if I went to college. It would have impacted his ability to move me along in the company like him. And now I would be old enough to be in management, but I'm not in management because Jim Crow stifled that generation one or two before me. Just giving you the data. There was a Harvard University study that was interesting that I read, that when black people, quote unquote, whitened their resume, for example, if they had American sounding names, if they had white sounding names, you know, if they were like Skylar, you know, like Skylar Jenkins has a greater opportunity to get the job than Tequila Jenkins. So if your name is Skylar or Taylor, but if it's Shaniqua, data, I'm not talking about my emotion. I'm talking about two human beings with the exact same credentials, same education, same ability. But because one has a Europeanized sounding name and one has an African or black sounding name, listen to the data. 25% of black candidates receive callbacks from their whitened resumes, but only 10% receive callbacks on their ethnic resumes. It's data. Do we live in a post-racist, post-Jim Crow era or not? Let's talk about Fortune 500 companies. I'm trying to prove to you. So if you're just tuning in, I'm James Gailliard. This is the James Gailliard Show. And I'm talking about the comments this past week that the African-American family, the black family, was better off during Jim Crow era than we are today. And so I've spent half the show on that. Now I'm spending another half the show on the data. The data is showing that systemic racism is still real, that it still exists, and that if we're going to move the United States forward, what's going to be required is that equity is established for all people. And equity is not going to be established for all people. What is wrong? Answer me this question. What is wrong with starting everyone at the finish line together, the starting line together? What is wrong with giving everyone equal opportunity as a slice of the pie? What is wrong with taking a pizza pie, slicing it up into 8 pieces, and giving everyone a slice or 2? What is wrong with that? Why is it necessary to place the pie at a place in the table where some people can't reach it, and then blaming them for being lazy, and that's the reason why they're hungry? What is wrong with giving everyone an opportunity? That's all this. Got a tickle in my throat. I really think that's what's at the heart of this election in North Carolina for governor. And I think that's what's at the heart of our election in the country for president of the United States. We can get all caught up in this stuff if we want. You can get all caught up in these lesser issues. I get the fact Joe Biden looks a little fragile. We got to get beyond that. We have to look at policy. We've got to get beyond the fact that Mark Robinson towers over Josh Stein, and it looks like a David and Goliath kind of scenario, and I hope it is a David and Goliath kind of scenario. We got to get past that and ask ourselves, what's the real policy implications? And what group of people are going to be more likely to pass policy to move everybody forward? You have Fortune 500 companies in our country. This was as of February of this year. I'm not talking about 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Of those 500 companies, only 1.6% of them has a black CEO. 1.6%. You do the data. Black people are 14% of the population, but we're less than 2% of the most powerful people in corporate America. And so, and let me tell you what's so funny. If you were to pull the data, I'm going through data, y'all. If we were to pull the data of the CEO, the black CEOs compared to the white CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, by and large, the black CEOs are better educated than the white CEOs. So this is not about people who are better educated and better qualified. This is about the fact that we live in a system of systemic racism still. Okay, let me give you more data. Everybody say data. The poverty rate amongst black people is double. More data. The average household income of white families is $75,000 compared to $46,000 for black people. The overall income for black Americans is 49% lower than white Americans. And listen, this is what I want you to understand. I don't care about white, Asian, Hispanic. Get everything you can get. But be fair about it. Be equitable about it. It takes a black woman 264 more days of work. That means on January 1, the white man stops working. A black woman of equal education, equal ability, equal experience, doing the exact same job, she has to work 264 more working days before she makes money equal to that white person. So today's show, this is James Gailliard. Listen to the James Gailliard Show. Today's show is I want to challenge the culture. You guys are being all emotional about this issue of racism. Why are you talking about racism? Why are you talking about? Because it's still real. If I was hungry and my stomach was growling and I was saying, I'm hungry. I'm hungry. Well, if my stomach was growling, I'm hungry, you wouldn't be. The reason I'm talking about being hungry is because I'm hungry. Let me ask you a question. Real quick. This water I'm drinking, is it cold, is it hot, or is it room temperature? One more time. The water I'm drinking, is it cold, is it hot, or is it room temperature? Now listen to me. You have no way of knowing because I'm the one drinking the water. I'm saying this to my white friends. You can't tell black people that racism does not exist. You're not the one drinking the water. You're not the one having the experience. You're not the one living it out. I don't know if there's anything more offensive than negating people's lived experiences. I mean, it's so crazy for me to act like I know what it's like to be pregnant. I've never been pregnant. I can't negate a woman's lived experience. I don't know what menopause is like. I don't know what hot flashes are like. Every day in America, we are negating the lived experiences of people of color as if something doesn't exist, but they're drinking the water and they're saying, look, I'm telling you, it's really, really hot. Or I'm telling you, it's really, really cold. According to the United States Department of Education, black students have half as likely, this is for my educators out there, according to the United States Department of Education, black students have half as likelihood to have an AP, that's an advanced placement, or an IB, that's an international baccalaureate credit. And they're only a third as likely to have an AP or an IB credit that's in math. Everything we have going on with science, technology, engineering, and math, all this STEM work, and black students have a third of the possibility of having an AP credit or an IB credit as white children. Okay, let's keep talking. How do you amass wealth in this country? Well, one way is to get a home, right? In order to get a home, you need a mortgage. Black families are more likely to get a denial on their home mortgage than white families. Let me give you another. I'm giving you data points because this is everyone saying racism doesn't exist in America. This is to shoot every hole in Mark Robinson's theory, Byron Donaldson's rhetoric. 75% of white Americans own their home, only 40% of black Americans. So again, if you have white friends, ask them to use you as the basis. White Americans are 70% of the population, but they represent only 30% of the people in prison. African Americans are 12% of the population, but they represent 33% in prison. And listen, to go out to Tim Scott and the Mark Robinson and the Byron Donaldsons of the world, let me help y'all gentlemen, just because you are African American males, you are 5 times more likely to be in prison than a white man. Period. And if you have children or gonna have children between 18 and 19 years old, when they get to 18 and 19 years old, listen to this data point. They are 13 times more likely to be arrested than a white 18 and 19-year-old. So here on the James Gailliard Show, I'm calling out Mark Robinson and Byron Donaldson and your ridiculousness to try to spew propaganda and misinformation, to try to coerce votes. No, we do not live in a post-racist America. And yes, you have become the first black lieutenant governor. And you know what? Quite frankly, I applaud that for you, bruh. But the reality of it here is we live in America that still does not create equitable opportunity for everyone. And what's going to raise the standard of living for everyone is when we all get some opportunity. So Byron Donaldson is wrong. Byron Donaldson is wrong. African American. So I told you you're going to vote. Do you believe or do you not believe that the African American family is better off during Jim Crow era than they are now? Would you like to go back to the Jim Crow era? That's what he's saying. Let's go back to the Jim Crow era. Let me give you a last data point, and I'll look at your comments. This was very interesting to me. The data suggests that marijuana usage between blacks and whites are almost dead even. Matter of fact, my good friend, Senator Greg Meyer, who's a state senator here in North Carolina, he recently pushed out an ad. If you haven't seen his ad, check it out. It's a white guy and a black guy. They're both driving, and they both get stopped smoking marijuana. And listen, let me tell you something. I don't smoke marijuana. I'm not promoting the smoking of marijuana. I'm simply telling you that we live in a society that still has some inequity and some systemic injustices, which is why we need to vote. We need to vote in this election. We need to participate in the process. We cannot sit on the sidelines, and we cannot. I don't care if Mark Robinson looks like us, if Byron Donaldson looks like us. We cannot believe the lies, the propaganda, and the manipulation. I don't care how boldly they speak. I don't care how aggressively they speak. I don't care how convincingly they speak. They are being used as tools of the enemy to destroy and to damage the African American community. And I'm not afraid to say it, because I've made up my mind on this show. We're going to be straight truth tellers. So marijuana usage is equal amongst all racial groups. So the same percentage of white people that use marijuana is the same percentage of black people that use marijuana, which, by the way, means more white people use marijuana than black people, because white people are a much higher percentage of the population. So marijuana usage, black person, white person, pretty much the same. But listen to this. But black people are 3.6 times more likely to get arrested because of it. So no, we do not live in this post-racist, equitable world. And that's what we are striving for. That's what this election is about. So, hey, I'm James Gailliard. You've been listening to the James Gailliard Show. I've got one closing thing I want to say about the UNC system chancellors. We're gonna take a couple bills right now. I'm gonna look at some of your comments, and we'll be right back after this commercial break.
The James Gailliard Show on Choice FM.
AURN News.
While the job numbers are out, employers added 272,000 jobs in May, showing that the job market is strong despite inflation and higher interest rates. Now, the unemployment rate ticked up to 4%, but it's still historically low. Economists had expected fewer job additions, and so the report seems as a pleasant surprise. Wages are growing with an average hourly pay increase to $34.91. That's a 4.1 yearly rise. While wage growth has slowed from the COVID-19 era shortages, it's still above the Fed's preferred rate for controlling inflation. Now, the Fed is watching the numbers as strong wage growth can fuel inflation. Economists don't expect the Fed to cut rates soon, especially if inflation remains high. Healthcare, leisure, and hospitality and professional services were among the industries hiring the most. The public sector also saw a rebound in job gains. For AURN News, I'm Ebony McMorris.
Pop's Diner, 132 South Church Street, Rocky Mount. Juicy burger, hot, delicious wing, yummy spaghetti, and the first pizza to ever be served downtown Rocky Mount. Hot, delicious pizza and more at Pop's Diner. Pop's Diner for hot dogs. Pop's Diner for lunch. Open daily from 11 till 7 p.m. City workers get the Pop's hookup. Pop's Diner open from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Wings, pizza, burgers, spaghetti, salads, and more. Hot, fresh, and fast at Pop's downtown Rocky Mount. Open 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday.
The People Station, Choice FM 92.1, extremely cold, and I'm kicking it with Queen, Cousin Kira.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you for coming in. We have listeners with great credit who still are looking for cars. They don't know what they want. What should they do, good credit or bad credit?
They gotta call me first, because the problem is dealerships are known for being dishonest. And when you need an honest answer before you sign a dotted line and you have that small print that nobody reads, you need to understand what this looks like. So any dealership anyone goes to, regardless of credit, they only have to sell you a car that is safe. It has to pass a safety inspection. The Carfax, the information that you get stuck with for the next, 6 years of a loan, they don't care, but I actually do. So I want them to call me so we can give them the good answers, the good information, so they make an educated decision and they get a fair deal.
Cousin Kira, make sure you give us the number so everyone can reach you. Give us the website too.
919-275-5372, and that spells out Ask Kira. And then you can go to www.askcousinkira.com.
AskCousinKira.com. Make sure you let her know the People Station sent you.
Hey, I have a secret. I use Secret Whole Body Deodorant because more than just my armpits stink.
Oh, can I use it where my bra rubs under my...
Oh, yeah.
And what about down there? My...
Totally. 4 out of 5 gynecologists would recommend it. So I tried it, and now I get 72 hours of freshness from my pits to my...
Ooh, I love that it's a spray.
Me too. And it comes in sticks and creams too. Go get your Secret Whole Body Deodorant.
The James Gailliard Show on Choice FM.
Well, we're back. We're rounding up the show today. I hope this has been informative and helpful. But what I will say is I hope you will share this. I know I laid out a lot of strong language, but I also backed it with data. I backed it with facts. And we have people like Mark Robinson that is just appealing to the emotion of people. And their hope, Byron Donalds and the Mark Robinson and Tim Scotts of the world, is their hope that you won't fact check, you won't critically think, you won't think through things. And on this show, we're going to do exactly that. I've got the best listeners and watchers in the world. LaShawn Jenkins says the piece that we missed with Jim Crow was the terror. Couldn't agree with you more. Mississippi led the South in lynchings during Jim Crow. So correct. Christopher McCoy, what's up, man? I hope you're doing well. Anyone in this day and age that believes that we, meaning African Americans, were, quote, better off during Jim Crow is not only misinformed, they are a danger to society. I could not agree more. Man, you're a younger generation. I hope you promote and share that, McCoy, with people your age, because you're the generation they're targeting with some of this. Tammy says, I don't want to go back. I remember working in the sheriff's department in high school. This white lady wanted me to read a poem at her church because she heard me. She was told no because I was black. Y'all, this is in the 80s, she said. Tell y'all a story real quick. I was at Smith's Red and White the second time that I ran for the North Carolina General Assembly. There was a gentleman, I parked my truck, and there was a gentleman, got out my truck, and a gentleman was sitting on his pickup truck, on the back of his pickup truck, kind of leaning against it. And I spoke to him. I tried to speak to everyone because I was trying to get every vote I could possibly get. And he had his gun showing. He had it out. It wasn't concealed. He had it on his hip. And as I walked by him and spoke to him, he said, aren't you the one running for the North Carolina General Assembly? He said, you're running against, and I forget my opponent, John Check. You're running against John Check. And I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I am. I'd love to have your support. He put his hand on his gun. Y'all, this was 2018. He put his hand on his gun and he cussed. And he said, I'd leave Nash County before I ever lived in a county where a black man could beat a white man. Y'all, that was 2018. I was told that. I hope he left Nash County because I actually won that election. And so when people say this was forever ago, they're just appealing to their own emotions. And they're not being honest, and they're lacking integrity and character. Or they're trying to just protect their own social status and their sphere of friendships. LaShawn says the data is troubling. Yes, it really is. Who else is out there real quick before starting everyone at the same spot dismantles the created system of marginalization in our country. Natasha, horrendous insecurity will never allow the equal pie slices. If you know you can't bake, you want to keep the pie to yourself. Yep, that's right. Data, right, exactly. Lived experiences. Appreciate that. Yep. Pipeline starts with how we label our quote-unquote gifted kids. Disparities. I mean, the list goes on and on. Y'all are the best, and I appreciate you, and I love you, and I'm thankful and grateful and humbled that you listen. I want to end today's show with a shout-out to Dr. Carrie Dixon. As you know, I am a trustee at the Elizabeth City State University, and she has been our chancellor there for the last 6 years. And she is now moving on, effective July 1, to be the new chancellor at the North Carolina Central University, NCCU. I could not be more excited for her, and I'm excited about the future of Elizabeth City State. She's left it in such good stead. Not been a lot of discussion about this, but Bonita Brown was elected as the 14th chancellor of Winston-Salem State University on May 29th of last month. And she is the first woman to permanently hold the position since the founding of the university in 1892. So I'm shouting out Dr. Carrie Dixon and Dr. Bonita J. Brown. Bonita J. Brown is actually an attorney, and so that's got me wondering about Peter Hines, who is president of the UNC system, because we know that Darrell Allison is also an attorney who's the chancellor of Fayetteville State University. And so going to be interesting to see if there's been a now movement towards attorneys taking on the helms of these schools. And so we're going to kind of watch this as it plays out. I'm committed to Elizabeth City State, committed that the work that Dr. Carrie Dixon remains strong. Every chance you get to support our HBCUs in our state, please do that. And let's again shout out Dr. Carrie Dixon. I'm James Gailliard. You've been watching and listening to the James Gailliard Show. I'm out of time, but I'm not out of talk. I'm out of clock, but I'm not out of content. Share this with somebody. Give me your comments. Tell me what you want me talking about. And I'll see you next Monday right here on Choice 92.1 FM. Peace, everybody.
The James Gailliard Show on Choice FM.
This is
WRSV, Elm City.
Turn Up.
Choice FM.